Good afternoon, and welcome to the next section of the LSO journey. We're going to talk about journeys today. And we have a great panel. I'm going to introduce them, and hopefully I say the right words. Silke is wonderful. She's Senior Vice President of Wholesale at Telekom Deutschland, and it's Silke Hoesch. Did we do it, Silke?
Well done.
Well done, okay. And then we also have Scott Melanson, Director of Digital Client Experience Group at Verizon Business Group. Scott. And also Bertrand Buclin. He is management, head of the International Technical Management at AT&T Business International. Okay. So this panel is about what we're calling, we've just agreed backstage in a meeting that we had, that we're going to talk about the real world perspective. There's a lot going on this morning and a lot of wonderful things about the advancement of LSO, seller, LSO implementations, but these are people who have actually experienced everything that's going on out there, and not only in the US, but also internationally. So this is a wonderful way to understand everything that's happening in terms of what we're calling the real world perspective and experiences with the implementations. So with that, I'd like to start with Silke and ask about what ways you're attaining and supporting the buyers that you come in contact with in terms of the countries, the types of buyers, why are they excited to be using your LSO APIs.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I have to say international buyers is not really a very clear definition, because at the end of the day, you usually have always international buyers regardless where the headquarters is located. So in our case, we are talking usually about leased line business where we have implemented or where we implement currently MEF-APIs, and usually our buyers are not a German regional small telco company. Yeah? We are talking about big players in the market, big global players. So therefore it is regardless if they buy in Germany from us as Wholesale Deutsche Telekom, or if they buy something with an end in, I don't know, from Tokyo to Sydney or whatever. Therefore, being international is something is really not important where your current case you want to build or your current leased line is located, and it's not important where your headquarters is located. It's more important where you act globally. And we just realized that in our case, the customer journey, or the seller and buyer journey, which is nothing else than a customer journey, is really so important, because you can't implement things on your own and just present at the end of the process something you have developed and expect some clapping hands, because really you have to go this jointly, you have to develop jointly, you have to co-create. And therefore, and we have seen already Fahim on stage, I hope he's nodding right now, this is really something which is a truly partnership, even if we talk in our business pretty often of we are competitors here and there. Yeah? We are talking about a wholesale world where everybody is doing at the end of the day, the same kind of business. I learned from Ian, I think it was this lunchtime, this super interesting expression of a frenemy. I was not aware of this word before, so and I would not go that far that I use something which is close to enemy, because we really talk about partners, but we don't have to forget that, of course, we are here and there competitors. And therefore, I think Frank's part this morning was so important, or at noon, about trust. Because even if you're competitors, and even if you have here and there different targets or agendas, you need to trust each other, and the APIs are helping us in our process that much, because it's very, very clear what to expect from each other. Yeah? It's very clearly standardized, written, the specifications are for both sides totally clear what you can expect from your seller, from your buyer, in the entire process. Where do you stand? How long is the way you have to go both together?
So you've taken a lot of time working on those relationships then, in order to, you know, to span countries and span different types of services, correct?
True, but usually you have already this, or you have already a kind of relationship, because none of our buyers, at least, are just new buyers based on the fact that now we have APIs embedded. Yeah? We were already in a partnership before, and now we are just developing our partnership together.
Okay, great. Scott, maybe you can talk about the US side. You're on the sell side for wholesale services in the US.
Yeah.
And how
yeah,
that
so we
differ,
also sell for internationally, but let me just talk a little bit about the domestic side. So we've had e-bonding capabilities in place on the domestic side for a long time, as people know, and we followed the ASOG standards with the ASRs of the past. And so we've been on the journey with LSO for the last few years, and I'd say it's been a long one for us. I think that the challenge that we've had was having something in place domestically that worked pretty well, actually, and then pivoting to something else. There was the question about the return on the investment. Talked about the business cases earlier in the panel. That was its own challenge to get through that originally. And then once that was through that, I think some of the challenges around development and testing around comparing what we had before to what we were building new caused a lot of angst with the business operations people around, hey, am I going to get the same response back on a recent issue design, as we would say in the old world? What does that mean in the MEF world in terms of the specification? So I think that's been a lot of challenges around getting it out into production. We do have an implementation now in production with one of the major carriers utilizing TransUnion, who I know is in the audience, and we're at the finish line. So that's a good thing, and I think we'll learn a lot of lessons from it, and I think we're going to actually bring that back to the MEF, and so that others don't go through that headache, that are on that same journey with us.
Right.
And the other thing to point out, I think, is that we talk a lot about the APIs, but the back offices haven't changed much. Okay, so if you're not translating it in the back office the way that the API expects it, you don't get the right results, right? So, and some of those back-end offices are very legacy-driven, so it's fine if we're talking about new services. But some of the old services we have still have to go to the back ends, and so the new APIs didn't benefit from the old legacy back ends, and still had the headaches coming back with the data that wasn't there in legacy either. But so a lot of challenges on the journey. We're at the finish line, but it's been a long journey.
You're almost at the goal.
Yeah, we're at the finish line. I think we're ready to turn this up to a larger volume, and once that happens, I think we'll get more carriers going too as well. But it's been a long run.
Yeah. That's good. So Bertrand, also, and when we had a prep call and we were talking about the experience, the journeys, and on your side, on the international wholesale side as well, and you talked about how you felt that just rethinking some of the automated processes and things that were being put in place really helped. And there was a quote that I actually wrote down. It said, you noted that with automation and a fully integrated suite, things that are a pain manually actually disappear.
Yes,
so
thank
maybe
you.
You could talk about that.
I'll rebound on Scott's point that when you implement the APIs, you have to also rethink of your back office systems and processes. And I'll give you two examples, one at the beginning of the life cycle, one at the very end of the life cycle. At the beginning of the life cycle is the quoting process. It's one of the most inefficient process in the whole world. 99% of the quotes that we generate are thrown away. And we're spending a lot of efforts on doing it and so on. Automation actually helps us making that pain disappear, because we now have a computer-driven quoting engine that if we need to talk to another provider, we can just issue that quote through an API, and it's much less painful. Now, for those that are only implementing an API as a veneer on top of their legacy process, they'll feel the pain 10 times more, because now you have robo-quoting going on.
Yeah.
So just a hint for those that intend to implement only quoting API, just beware of what you're doing. It will be a painful journey. But for those that are implementing the API into their quoting system, back-end system, then it makes that painful process of quoting disappear. Because now you have computers talking to computers. We just need to make sure that they're talking properly to each other, right? But if they do, that pain point has disappeared. That highly inefficient process is not a problem anymore. You've elevated the problem to a different level. You need to make sure that the quote response you get are correct. You need to make sure that the robo-quoting thing is not about just sucking your database out and those kind of issues. You create another kind of problems, but the actual inefficient process of quoting has disappeared. At the end of the life cycle, when we are disconnecting a customer because they're shutting down the location or whatever, we have a process internally where when we generate a disconnect to our wholesale supplier for the last mile access, we actually generate that system that disconnect internally, and we sit on it for 24 hours. Why do we do that? It's because we're afraid of disconnecting errors. So that gives us essentially 24 hours of relapse in case someone made a mistake and we just need to say, oops, let's keep the order in place. Now, if you're in an automated environment, then you can push that disconnect through, and within minutes, the service is disconnected. Is that actually an issue? No. Because if you could disconnect it in minutes, you can actually reinstate it in minutes. So that whole notion of disconnecting error is actually not so much of an issue. We may have created an outage, unplanned outage, but you can still recover the service very quickly. So this whole thinking of, I'm going to have to step back and rethink and check twice that I've not disconnected something in error and so on, which is a huge pain point in terms of customer satisfaction, is actually disappearing if you have proper automation. You can then push it further up and say, economically, if I'm disconnecting that quickly, do I actually need to keep paying for early termination fees and those kind of things? Right? That's another debate commercially, but it's part of rethinking the whole process, because automation brings a new dimension to how we're interacting. And that's what we have to do. So to Scott's point, we have to rethink the end-to-end process properly in the spirit of automation, because a lot of things we took for granted are not necessary anymore.
Can I add to one thing? So back to other pieces of stuff. So, business processes are important too behind these APIs, right? So think about someone coming on a portal today and they want a 70 meg service, but they only see the drop down for 50 and 100. So intuitively, what are you going to do? We're going to go to 100, maybe a 50, right? On an API call, 70 comes over, what do we tell them if it's not front? We don't have that service at 70 meg, right? Now the buyer thinks that we don't have that service. What are we doing about that? So the business rules inside the APIs are just as important as the APIs themselves, and that's the stuff we're finding out that's actually falling down when we're trying to implement stuff, and then the business is going crazy, expecting us technical folks to kind of get the APIs right, and then realizing that we don't have revenue 2-3 months down the road, right? That's a problem.
That's it.
That's a big problem.
Yeah. Anything that goes on a robo is potentially
got to have the rules around it, right? Got to have the logic around it, right?
Powerful, right? And that's something about the pace of transitioning from the ASR systems that we talked about, Scott, as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's kind of waiting for the folks to kind of get past the point of the transition. I think this is probably maybe us and the bigger carrier kind of getting to the finish line is going to be the piece that kind of gets everyone else moving. I think we're there now. And I think like I said before, we'll bring those learnings back to everyone else, so the other carriers in the domestic space won't have to go through those heartburns that we went through. So I think it's imperative that we get there, though. If you talk about going up, there was a panel before talked about things that we're selling now. we want to offer, for instance, like a dedicated internet with an FWA backup as an example, right? You can't do that in some of the ASR process today. The MEF has the ability to kind of handle that going forward. So some of the new services and some of the new technologies that we want to get to is all enabled by the LSO capabilities. And so that's the critical piece of getting off the ASR for the future, right? So that's why we want to be there.
Great. So Silke, maybe could you talk about some of the countries and the active buyers and services that you're supporting now? Just interested in those kinds of services.
So we have, interesting-wise, two different approaches currently in the company, which is coming from the fact that we were, or still are until the end of this year, separated in terms of wholesale national business in Germany and the international arm. So what we have done internationally was setting up the MEF APIs in an entire ecosystem together with a partner, and I guess you are around here, I can't see you, but Engso is here for sure. I have seen already some of the colleagues to help us to bring it in a complex ecosystem. Plus, nationally, we have done it ourselves, so we have developed this with our own internal IT department to bring it into our backend systems we use. And here we realized that we have still some issues internally, and you may have this in your companies as well, due to the fact that our IT people are busy with TMF APIs as well. Yeah? So, and this turning around, looking into two different directions and building two different things is sometimes occupying some resources and efforts. So, but I totally agree. I mean, this entire transformation in terms of automation and is accelerating that much, and we urgently need to speed up here because we will not have enough people anymore in the future to do that many manual work, but we have to assure that we don't overload our internal developers as well as our business people as well as our customers. So therefore this is a real and hard challenge we do have currently, because we have chosen two different approaches and trying to do now everything in parallel, so to say.
So the challenge may be in terms of the onboarding new LSO sellers, and how is that working? I mean, is that something that is in, there's a lot of people who are wanting to do that, a lot of companies that are investing in that, or what specifically, I guess, would be the challenges?
It's again different, because of course you can do so with a partner, with an enabler who's helping you to do this onboarding process properly as well, or as we have done it nationally in a domestic market, you do this on your own. Luckily, we are usually currently talking with our biggest customers, at least in the leased line business. So therefore, I think this is this kind of marathon you spoke already about. It's not like you can't co-create with all your buyers in the very same time. You really have to do it step by step in an iterational process, and it will take some time. So we are just not ready right now, or finish line. I do not even see the finish line right now.
There's no finish line.
There's no, oh God. Yeah.
What are you seeing, Bertrand?
The reason I say there is no finish line is, AT&T has been, among the first one, and we're still, the largest buyer so far. I haven't seen Stan Hubbard's latest reports, but there's about 45 operators that have MEF APIs in operations. If we exclude those that are doing quote only, or are only providing IP services, we're doing business already in production today with 32 of them, of the others, and there are 37 that are doing Ethernet services. So the 5 remaining, we are in discussions with them for implementing the APIs, and after that, we will be done in terms of onboarding them, right? It's been a difficult journey, but we're actually starting the next turn of the journey right now. For a number of security reasons, we had to, for example, update all of the API keys and change our service URLs for that. It's an interesting lifecycle process. You know, we're talking of lifecycle service orchestration. Lifecycle management of our APIs is something that we're learning about now. Just the process of changing those keys, for some operators, is trivial. For others, it reveals that, well, actually, the implementation was not thought along those lines, right? We, AT&T, are now embarking into our second generation of our backend system. We've had the first generation on which we've onboarded all our operators, and we're now writing our second generation code. We need to change the backend platform, and we're embarking on doing that. That will mean that we will have to actually re-establish and retest all of our existing APIs. We are running today from the LSO SDK release 2 all the way up to Haley. And we have all the implementations there. We will need to retest all of them. And the new version has to still be compatible with all of them, because we made the choice of never forcing one of our sellers to upgrade to the next version. And you know, there is no programmed obsolescence of the API. We didn't think that we could you know, take a position where we're pushing people to go there, because that would be demotivating people. Yeah. It's hard enough as a seller to build it up, that if we now say, oh, you have to invest twice as much because you need to keep going to the next layer or the latest SDK, people will say, well, I just cannot afford it. So we made the deliberate choice to remain backward compatible with all the versions we have out there. But that means we actually have 7 different implementations that we have to maintain. Yeah. It's interesting life cycle challenges.
You know, I'm a bit concerned with just say the mid-tier wholesale buyers out there, right? So when you talk about AT&T and Verizon and say Lumen and others, not a problem. We get it. We send enough transactions between each other to warrant the type of investment. But when you get into some of the smaller wholesalers, quoting for sure, it's very important. There's so much transactions that go across, but how many quotes happen before you get an order, right? There's a multitude of quotes before you get an order. And I think I'm not really seeing the smaller wholesale buyers feeling the value of the API. That's a problem, right? So I think they understand that there's value in terms of the things that go on with swivel chairs and incorrect stuff that could be ordered and stuff like that. So it has value, but the investment piece, they struggle with. And so that's been there for a while, and it's still there. I think we got more to do. So, you know.
Mike Occurrence was making an interesting problem on the statement on the prior panel, that some of the operators who implemented the API with us first are now actively turning to all of their buyers and saying, guys, you need to adopt it. Because I now have the capability, I've seen the benefit, and you need to go down this path because we need to collectively build this automation. To Silke's point, we cannot afford having all the people we had. So, the journey has started. The train is slowly leaving the station. It's a slow start, so you still have time to jump on it. Don't worry. But the train is leaving the station.
How long is that process going to take, do you think, to get to that level?
Well, we started the journey 10 years ago. 10 years ago is when MEF came up with the third network story. And MEF-50 was what, 2014 or something like that? It is 10 years.
Wow. Oh, yes.
If in our case, as I said, we've onboarded everything there is to be onboarded at this point in time, or almost. It is supporting 40% of our business. So 40% of the access connections that we're ordering on the Ethernet side are being processed through the APIs today. So it's a big volume. We've seen a 50% increase in cycle time, or decrease actually, improvement in the cycle time. So orders that used to take, in average something like 2 months to deliver, when we process through the API, we're down to 1 month. And those that are genuinely on net, we're down to minutes.
Yeah, I think there's also, back to the value thing again, I think there's more enhanced status and enhanced milestones that should be coming back as part of the LSO process too, that will help. There's still a lot of spreadsheets after an order's been placed, going to figure out where it sits in its life cycle. And that's all done offline sometimes with spreadsheets. If we get away from that and get to some more enhanced milestones after, say, that FOC that we say, that would also help too. So that, I think there's another piece of maybe some support by the MEF as we continue on the journey that will also help if they can get that incorporated into their LSO.
Well, I'd say a lot of progress has been made in the last year.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it sounds like. Sure. We've got 30 seconds. Any last thoughts?
Keep plugging.
What's there? Keep plugging.
Keep plugging. As you said, we've been on the journey for 10 years. I think let's keep the faith and keep plugging. That's all we can do here. Just get the people aware of the value.
Close to the goal.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not only a slow train, the doors remain open.
There you go.
Yes.
Just jump
The doors,
And
the
you
doors
don't know
are
when
wide
to
open
jump
and
off,
welcoming.
is that it? You must jump off.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. Well, thank you very much for your insight, and hope you all enjoyed listening to these panelists, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.